Welcome to Experian Talks ID fraud support. Now in this video I'm going to walk you through how to spot you've been the victim of ID fraud. So we'll look at some of the warning signs and what to check for on your credit report, and also where to get the best support. Also, for anyone who hasn't seen my other video, it's called Experian Talks Protecting Yourself from ID Fraud. That video gives you lots of ways that a fraudster might try and steal your details, and also the best way to protect yourself. So let's jump in and we'll talk about some of the warning signs and how you can spot that something suspicious might have happened. So let's just talk about some of the most common ways you might spot that you've been a victim of ID fraud. Now, the first is that you might receive bills or statements to your home address, something that you don't recognize or have never opened. Perhaps you get a PIN or even an account card, like a new credit card, that comes through to your home address too. But the other thing that might happen is you'll start receiving emails or text messages or phone calls about an account or some kind of application with a lender that you don't recognize. Now, my advice here, just like in my previous video, is always be cautious. When you receive an email, a text message, phone call, or even a letter with information on asking you to contact them, I want you to avoid that as much as possible, because you never know if it's going to be a scam. So my recommendation here is find the company website, go on there and use their formal communication channels to get in touch with them. So usually phone number, email, or even online chat, something like that. But the other thing I want you to do is checking your credit report. Now, you can check your Experian credit report for free. It's called your statutory credit report. You can do that with all three credit reference agencies. Now, really, you should do it on an annual basis. So kind of do a once a year check-in. And that way you can see if there is anything suspicious popping up on your credit report. But what I also want you to do, and try and follow as a general rule too, is to check your credit report 2 to 3 months before you apply for credit. And there's a couple of reasons to do that. The first is that gives you enough time to get anything suspicious investigated and removed from your credit report before you apply. Which leads to the second point, which is that what you don't want to do, or you want to try to avoid doing, is finding out that you've been a victim of fraud at the time you make an application, because that can affect what happens when you do apply. So you want to avoid it and get ahead of it as much as possible. So let's talk for a minute about the support that's available to you. And the first thing I want to talk about here is, no matter how you discover you're the victim of ID fraud, the first thing I want you to do is check your credit report for free with all three credit reference agencies, because then you can find all the applications for credit, accounts, linked addresses in your name. And you've got a couple of options once you do that. The first is contact the lender directly. Tell them you found some fraudulent information, ask them to investigate it. And once they do that, they can update it with the credit reference agency to remove it from your credit report. But the other option is that you can query through a credit reference agency like Experian. In fact, every year we help over 10,000 people clear up their credit reports if they've been a victim of ID fraud. What we'll do is we'll contact the lender on your behalf, and we'll tell them that there's fraudulent information on your credit report, and we'll ask them to investigate. Now, there's other support that we can provide during that process too, which can really help. Now, the first is, if you do dispute something on your credit report, we can add something on there called a notice of dispute. It's a short note that just says that account at that point in time is under dispute, and that can sometimes help if you are making applications for credit or if anyone's checking your credit report. The other thing you can do through a credit reference agency, and you have to do this through all three separately, but it's adding a password to your credit report. This is called a notice of correction password. It means when you apply for credit, the application is referred and it's sent through to a person to manually look at, who should then ask for this password. So what you want to do is make sure that the password that you supply is unique and only something that you should know. Now, the other thing that you can do through Experian is to register with Cifas, which is the UK's fraud prevention community. There's a section for it on your credit report. Now, generally what that means is that if you've got a registration on there, lenders may take more care over your application. So it might mean that they ask for more ID documents just to confirm who you are. You can self-register too, but if you do that, there's a fee. So just check on their website to make sure you know how much that is. Now, finally, what you also might want to do for good housekeeping is register any type of fraud with Action Fraud. Now, they're the UK's National Reporting Centre for Fraud and Cybercrime. They can also give you crime reference numbers if needed as well. So hopefully from this video, you've understood a little bit more about how to spot if there's anything suspicious going on and how to get the right help if something does happen.